Hello my friends, welcome back to our PettyRevenge subreddit, my favorite subreddit guys, because a lot of the time the revenges are harmless and funny. You can actually learn a thing or two from them to use on others. I'm kidding, don't use them on others. In this episode, you're going to hear 10 stories. The first 2 stories are about how people dealt with aggressive tailgaters. The third story is about how OP deals with an insulting airplane passenger, and the last one involves a spaghetti bowl and a giant mess. I hope you guys stay for the stories today, have a few laughs, and please hit that subscribe button for future videos. Let's get into it. This first story is titled, I am going 10 over and you're still tailgating me? Here, let me show you something. A few months ago, I was driving to work and getting close. I had 2 turns remaining until I turned into the building, just a few blocks away on side streets, no highways involved. The guy behind me was in a black BMW, and he was riding my tail the whole time. I saw him checking his phone, then making angry faces at me and getting closer and closer. I sped up a bit, thinking it might calm him down. I was going 5 miles per hour over the speed limit. Nope, it didn't help. I made the first turn, and I was now on the street where my building is, maybe 600 yards up ahead. The guy was still behind me, driving inches from my bumper and obviously furious that I was going the speed limit. So, I sped up a bit and saw that he did the same. I drive an 8-year-old Toyota truck. It's not one of the big, huge ones, but not one of the small ones either. I have all-terrain tires, and I've certainly driven through pastures, over rocks, and popped a curb or 10 in my time. My suspension's in good shape, and I have no problem treating my decade-old truck like a truck. As I got closer to my building, there was a large speed bump in the street, fairly large, effectively designed to get people to slow down as they approached the parking garage entrance. I looked back and saw that he was still riding my bumper. I remember thinking to myself that I needed to slow down for the speed bump. And looking back, I thought that if I hit my brakes, this guy would definitely hit me, going as fast and as close as he was. A plan took shape in my mind, and I sped up. I was doing about 45 miles per hour when I hit that speed bump. Yeehaw, my truck caught some good air. I did a bit of a jump and landed, never once touching my brakes. I didn't even tap them. I gave him zero warning for what was about to happen. I was watching my rearview mirror intensely during this because I wanted to see his reaction. He was cradling his cell phone between his ear and shoulder when he hit the speed bump. His hood bucked up behind me and slammed into the ground. I saw him go flying out of his seat, straight up. He slammed his head on the roof of his BMW, and his head rolled sideways from the impact. Then he slammed back into his seat violently. He had an "oh my gosh, what was that?" look on his face as he grabbed the wheel with both hands to recover. And yes, he slowed right down after that. The next story is titled, Cut Off and Vaguely Threaten My Wife. Enjoy 5 years of being slightly delayed. 5 years ago, my wife and I started new jobs in a new city, right down the road from each other's offices, employed with the same government agency. Our schedules were roughly similar for several months before she went to a night shift, so we would occasionally encounter the same people or vehicles in our commute. The commute consisted mostly of 2-lane roads with no passing. One day, my wife got cut off by a fancy black sports car with a vanity plate, let's say Dicklaw. He had been tailgating her for nearly 10 minutes already, and she had the nerve to only go 5 miles per hour over the speed limit on a busy downtown road. The moment he could, he cut into the other lane and passed her, giving her maybe only a foot or 2 of space after doing so, and forcing her to hit the brakes in response. She honked her horn at him, justifiably. To her surprise, he stopped his car in front of her. He got out of his vehicle, an older, balding male in a fancy tailored suit, and started marching toward my wife's car, shouting and ranting with his fist balled up. He hit her car a couple of times. Thankfully, it didn't get worse because my wife stayed in her car and already had her phone out to call 911. Incidentally, that's also her place of employment at the time. And she was wearing a uniform that bears a bit of resemblance to a sworn officer's uniform. Dicklaw apparently noticed all this after putting a crack in her windshield and immediately headed back to his car and drove off. About a month later, my wife ended up having to talk to Internal Affairs. A prominent member of the legal community made an official complaint against her for reckless driving and aggressive behavior. Internal Affairs, thankfully, is run by some awesome people, and we had the physical damage to her vehicle that we photographed, a partial recording of his shouting from the 911 call, and the responding officer's report. The complaint was dismissed as unfounded. Due to Dicklaw's prominent status as an attorney for almost 30 years, nothing more could come of it legally. My wife moved to night shifts, and my own schedule adjusted slightly. I was working a typical 9-to-5 job, heading from an office along mostly the same route that my wife followed. Lo and behold, I soon discovered that with my adjusted hours, I was leaving the same parking garage as Dick Law every day of the week at the same time. For the past nearly 5 years, I waited for him almost every day of the week and made sure to drive home in front of him at the exact speed limit. This easily extended his commute home by 5 to 10 minutes each day, depending on how much other traffic there was on the road. He tried tailgating me, flashing his high beams, honking, and I was relentless. Soon after, he changed his hours at the office to escape the delay in getting home. But thanks to an accomplice at his office, I never had a problem learning his schedule or what vehicle he was driving when he sold his old one. During the times I would take a vacation, I had comrades from my department take up the mantle of driving slowly home to inconvenience this guy. I've gone through 3 cars in the ensuing time frame, but he never seemed to want to make a confrontation out of it. As of 3 months ago, I moved to a new office, and Dick Law retired shortly after. The saga has ended, and I can only assume that he's off to enjoy a retirement of being a jerk or whatever it is lawyers do in their free time. It was a good run, and would always fill me with satisfaction at the end of each day, no matter how much nonsense I may have faced. This has got to be one of the most petty revenges that I've ever read on here. OP freaking did that for 5 years, guys. The dedication to being petty toward that man is legendary. The next story is titled, "You Want to Slightly Insult Me, I'll Slightly Ruin Your Flight." This is something I'm surprisingly proud of and easily the most petty thing I've done in my life. About a year ago, I was on a domestic flight. I was seated toward the front of the plane and lined up to board when they called for my group. I saw I had a window seat, and as I saw where I was sitting, I noticed an older woman in the aisle seat of my row and who I learned to be her daughter, maybe in her late 40s, in the middle seat. I let them know that I was sitting next to the window and apologized for making them get up so I could sit down. The older lady didn't seem to understand what I was saying at first and just kept smiling at me until her daughter told her to get up because they had to let me pass. The older woman got up and told me not to worry about it, but her daughter seemed extremely annoyed when she told her to move for me. I didn't mind at all and apologized once more for being too big to fit past them without having to get up. Once again, the older lady gave me a big smile and told me not to worry about it. Unfortunately, the daughter was nowhere near as happy as her mother. This is the point where the daughter started to fire off comments to her mother that were directed at me. She was annoyed at the fact that since I had a window seat, I should have been on the plane before them so they didn't have such a hassle to get back up after they were already seated, and so on. Her mother didn't seem to pay her any mind. I just ignored her tirade. I did feel guilty that I made them get up for me. When the daughter saw her mother was ignoring her, she started to look for anyone around us that she could complain about me to. She even asked the flight attendant for a glass of wine because this silly jerk next to her had stressed her out. I put my headphones in and occasionally would pause the movie I was watching on my phone to check if she was still complaining about me. I usually have to put up with comments and slight insults for work, and I've been called a lot worse before. Honestly, being called a silly jerk is more humorous than anything, so I was just going to let it slide. That's when I noticed, as we reached flying altitude, that she was trying to see out the window to look down on the city where we were leaving. Immediately, I hunched myself forward to block her from seeing out the window and kept watching my movie. Initially, I planned to block the window for about 20 to 30 minutes, but 20 became 30, 30 became 45, and I thought, what the heck? I'm just going to fully commit to hunching in front of the window for the entire flight. I saw her getting annoyed, but I blasted my volume, held my bladder, skipped the mid-flight snack and drinks, and continued to block the window until we landed. It was definitely worth it. I need to address the part where OP says he apologized for being too big to squeeze past them. Guys, I don't even think a little kid can squeeze past 2 occupied seats to get to the window seat. Also, he didn't need to hold his bladder at cruising altitude. All you pretty much get to see is a sky with clouds, and everybody knows that's super interesting. The next story is titled, "Builders Dump Stuff in Front of My Office Door? Your Lunch Now Paints the Walls." I work alone in a small office in a public building that's undergoing some renovations while it's closed to the public. There is an office space in front of my office that's usually unoccupied. Think of an office space with the manager's office attached at the end, and I just rent the manager's office. Building managers were supposed to notify us if they ever intended to rent out the space in front of my office so we could build a temporary wall or something so that I didn't need to walk through someone else's office to get to mine. But I guess they thought they didn't need to do this because the builders are only there temporarily. So now this space is occupied by a site office for construction. I'm slightly annoyed at the building management for not notifying me of this, but I'm way more annoyed at the builders because the space has turned into a dumping ground. To get to my office, I have to walk past light fixtures, tool bags, random chairs in the walkway, and a toilet bowl. I also have to listen to builders talking nonsense while 12 of them sit in a room fit for 5 having lunch. It's like a teenager's bedroom, but instead of clothes and stale socks, the floor is covered in building materials and tools. I asked them to keep it clear, as it's the walkway to my office and not a storeroom. They said, sure, but they basically rolled their eyes at me, laughed, and did nothing. I took some pictures of the mess and reported it to the building management. 1 week later, they tidied up slightly and gave me a sassy, we cleaned up a bit around here for you, mate. No need to thank us, as I walked in that morning. A few hours later, it was almost worse than it was before, to the point where I couldn't leave my office without moving 4 boxes of supplies that were put directly in front of the door. I also heard them whispering about how I'm such a jerk. Cut to today. I went to step out to get a coffee, and before I opened the door, I looked through the window of the door to see someone's half-eaten spaghetti sitting on the floor right in front of my doorway. I lost my composure for a moment and said, forget it. I opened the door and purposely tripped on the bowl of spaghetti, causing it to spray all over the room and the 2 builders in the room. Spaghetti got on everything. Sauce on their computers, noodles in the toilet bowl, in the carpet, and most impressively, all over the builders. They started to shout at me, but I got just as mad, saying, who the heck puts a bowl of spaghetti on the floor in front of a door? I kind of snapped at this point, which is very out of character for me. I told them that this is an office, not a storeroom, and that they're worse than my teenage nephew. I told them to clean up, or I'd start kicking everything aside that's in the path, delicate or not. They sheepishly said yes, and I went to get my coffee. When I returned, no one was in the office and the mess was still on everything, but I didn't care at that point and retreated into my office to focus on work. Fast forward a few hours later and I got an email from the building management. I cracked a huge smile as I read an email basically saying that the builders reported my conduct and had them come inspect the damage. However, they noticed the unacceptable amount of mess in the office that had not been cleared up from the last time they asked them to, and the builders admitted that the food was placed on the floor in front of the doorway. So they expected the builders to clean up the mess, to pay for the cleaning, and to place no blame on me in this case. If the mess comes back, I'm to call them directly, as the builders are on their last warning from a few other incidents in the building. It was a longer and more official email, but you get the point. Now, I'm occasionally looking through the window on the door, while the builders crawl around on their hands and knees, scrubbing spaghetti out of the carpet. I'm not proud of losing my cool and handling things the way I did, but I won't deny that it worked, and it felt really good. I hope they didn't decide to retaliate after that petty revenge. Who the heck leaves a bowl of spaghetti in front of a doorway? It's almost as if they wanted Op to step in it, but their plan backfired, guys. The next story is titled, This Girl in the Theater Had Her Feet Up on the Back of My Friend's Chair. I was out at a movie with my friends last night. We came and sat down, and I realized pretty soon that the girl in the row behind us had her feet up on my friend David's seat. She was there with one of her friends, so David turned around and said something like, do you think you could put your feet down? I think they said something in response, but I didn't hear it, and the feet didn't go down. A few minutes later, David said, Hey, will you get your feet off my chair? It's extremely rude. They still didn't budge. So I told David that he should go find an employee and get them to talk to this girl. He did exactly that. After a couple of minutes, an employee came in and talked to the girl. She was obviously pretty annoyed, but begrudgingly agreed to put her feet down. After the employee left, she put her feet right back up. At this point, I was pretty fed up. Why is it so important to you to have your feet up on someone's chair? You're just being a brat. So, I got up out of my seat, walked up 2 rows, sat down in the seat directly behind this girl, and stuck my foot on the back of her chair and pushed it forward. They both turned around to try to say something to me, but I couldn't really hear them since the movie had started by this point. So, I just said, just watch the movie. I kept my feet up there for the entire movie. It felt like I had done wall sits for 2 hours, but I'm glad I did it. That's a pretty good move, Ope. The ultimate power move would have been to turn around, pull off both of her shoes, and toss them across the theater. This next story is titled, I Fed the Dog Treats. Buckle up, kiddos. This is a long and exciting ride. The year was 2006. I was a young, naive girl who had gone and gotten myself married to someone completely wrong for me. He refused to work, and as a result of financial difficulties, with both of us being in school and only me working, we found ourselves living with his mom. Let me tell you, that's every newlywed's dream, having a mother-in-law as a roommate. Over the course of us living with her, any time I would buy myself food or treats, my mother-in-law would eat it. It didn't matter where it was or where I hid it, she was a bloodhound for sniffing out things that I bought just for me. The final straw was one night when I had gone out to dinner at the Cheesecake Factory. I had taken my slice to go and put it in the fridge. I was going to have it after work the next day. The next day at work was absolutely awful, and the only thing getting me through my shift was that slice of cheesecake that I knew was in the fridge. So, I went home and popped the lid off the container, and it didn't look right. There were fork marks all around the outside perimeter of my cheesecake, like she could just sneak some off all around, and I wouldn't notice. I was furious. I went and handed it to her, and told her that she may as well eat the rest of it. Fast forward a few days, and I'm at the pet store picking up some dog food. I'm standing in line waiting to check out, and they have these little boxes of dog treats that look exactly like the little red boxes of animal crackers you can buy for little kids. Now, it clearly says on the front, circus animals for dogs. About this time, I've got the little devil sitting on my shoulder whispering in my ear, "Do it." Then the little angel pops up on my other shoulder and screams, "You have to do it!" So, they magically ended up with the stuff I was buying. I drove home and left everything in a bag all together on the kitchen counter. Several hours later, she came into our room and said, "Hey, I think there was something wrong with those animal crackers. They were the most awful ones I've ever eaten. I had to eat a whole thing of frosting with them just to finish them all." I said, "Huh," and shrugged my shoulders. I would have looked her straight in the face and said, "Animal crackers? What animal crackers?" "Oh, you mean that bag of dog treats that I picked up for my friend and left on the counter? If I had a cookie that tasted bad, I wouldn't go find frosting and then eat the rest of the cookies." Oh my goodness. The next story is titled, "Teacher Wouldn't Let Me Use the Restroom, I Got Her Suspended." The title explains it. To preface, I have Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. This qualifies me as disabled, and so, starting when I first got sick in high school, I was required accommodations by state law. Being disabled was hard and pretty complicated since, after being diagnosed with IBD, I started getting various other health issues, ranging from kidney issues to neurological issues to fibromyalgia. My school was very reasonable, and even after missing 3 months when I was first diagnosed, I still got all of my credits. The following year, I was doing all right. Then, the second semester, one of my teachers left, and the new one was a complete monster. She refused to teach with a textbook and used Wikipedia instead. She wouldn't give us any tests or practice for the AP exam that we were due to take, and I was very frustrated and felt unprepared. She absolutely loathed me since I had a little pink pass that allowed me to take my meds in class, go to the nurse as needed, and have unlimited restroom breaks. She thought it was a disruption, and I would do my best to wait until she was done talking unless I was in too much pain. But she would always roll her eyes and groan at me. One day, I had just gotten in from a doctor's appointment and rushed into her class. I asked to go to the restroom and said I'd be right back, and she said, "No." Well, asking is just a formality. All of the teachers get emails about the disabled students and know about their accommodations. So, I told her, "I need to go to the restroom, and I'm going." As I left, she groaned something about me always wasting class time and faking it. I picked up my stuff and took it with me. I went to the restroom and then went downstairs to my dean's office. I simply told him that they should let her know that she's required to let me leave the class for a reason, and I have medical paperwork to back that up. He apologized profusely and called the teacher. He told her that he was sending a substitute to her room and he wanted to speak with her. Then he called for a substitute teacher on his walkie-talkie. She arrived at his office looking very displeased, to say the least. He sent me out of the room, and I waited in the lobby for about 20 minutes. Once she left, he had her stop at the desk to fill out some paperwork. He brought me back into the office to fill out paperwork, too, about what had happened. A few other students who heard what happened came in as witnesses. After she was gone for 3 weeks, to my knowledge, she was suspended because she opened them up to a potential lawsuit. Blatantly denying a disabled student their accommodations is against the law, and the school didn't tolerate it one bit. I will admit that I do feel bad, but I don't take any nonsense like this when it comes to my body and my diseases. Guys, I was never a fan of having to ask permission to leave the classroom to use the bathroom. If you gotta go, you gotta go. I used to have a teacher in high school who would purposely not let kids go to the bathroom when they asked. She'd always be like, right after I finish what I'm saying, you don't want to miss this part, and then she'd ramble for like 10 to 15 minutes, and then you'd have to ask again. Some teachers really just want to torture kids. The next story is titled, I Got Owned by My 7th Grade Music Teacher. As a teen, I was a bad kid in school who always lipped off to the teachers and had a huge chip on my shoulder. I wish I could go back and treat people differently, but I can't. In the 7th grade, I was really into skateboarding, smoking cigarettes, skipping class with my friends, etc. When I did go to class, I was disruptive at best. So, my old music teacher had tried everything to get me to just shut up and leave her class alone. Meetings with parents, detentions, extra homework. She tried it all, or so I thought. Every day in between classes there would be announcements on the loudspeaker. What's for lunch? Sporting events coming up? Academic achievements? Whatever. On this day, the assistant principal was listing the 7th grade students of the month for different categories. Math, science, critical issues. And then the student of the month for music studies is my name. I froze in the hallway. Surely I was just hearing things. Then my friends started finding me in the hallway and roasting me for being such a good boy, a teacher's pet, etc. I went to music class that day. And with the biggest grin on her face, she had the whole class stand up and give me a round of applause for being such a wonderful student in her class. I don't believe I've ever been more embarrassed in my life. Even at 12, I knew what she was doing and that she had just completely owned me. The next story is titled, Neighbor Won't Stay Off My Property, Gets Fenced Out. A little background, my current place is a fairly new build. It backs to some woods and was empty for a bit before we moved in. My neighbor has a corner lot, also backs to the woods, but is a bit oddly shaped since the woods are considered protected green space. Because of this situation, they had used maybe a third of my backyard when they did outdoor activities such as volleyball, badminton, etc. None of this bothered me because their kids are really nice and respectful. Fast forward a couple of years, and I'm having the backyard renovated. Well, the neighbor apparently had an issue with this because he kept bothering the crew during construction, telling them what they could and couldn't do, saying they were too loud or doing things wrong, and claiming that I had asked him to oversee the crew. Spoiler, I did not. Eventually, the head contractor had enough and complained to me about the micromanagement. I went and talked to the neighbor, and he's acting like he's doing me a huge favor by keeping them in line, but he agreed to back off. And he did. For about 2 days. I got a notification on my ring on a day the crew was off, and there was my neighbor on my patio, picking up, inspecting, and throwing down some pavers that had already been laid. I told him to kindly get off my property, and he proceeded to flip me off and walk back into his place. So, time for the petty revenge. When we first moved in, I had a whole house natural gas generator put in because power outages are common when thunderstorms roll through. The thing about those is they're loud when they turn on. Since we were doing the renovation, I planned on putting a living fence in across from the generator to mute some of the noise that would travel to his place. Well, I talked to the head contractor, and we happily agreed to shift the trees from the generator down to the woods and essentially cut off his property from my property. The neighbor was not happy about that move and called the city surveyor to dispute the property line. But my contractor had made sure that we were fully on my property, with about 8 inches to spare to account for tree growth. The end result? The neighbor's upset but powerless, and I have some nice trees to look at in the backyard, and there's nothing to stop the symphony of my generator when it kicks on every week to do a status check. Well, OP, it's time for you to get some cameras set up around that generator because you never know. The next story is titled, This is an Oldie But a Goodie. Family stuff ahead, featuring my sister and her BFF. I was about 12 or 13 and was babysitting my sister and her friend. They were playing house and they found some empty beer cans my parents had just finished before going out. They asked if they could play with them. I cleaned them out and let them have them. About 2 days later, my dad burst into the room screaming at me for giving a 6-year-old beer. Mind you, I was still asleep when he burst in, so I was completely confused. Later, he showed me the empty beer cans in my sister's room and asked why I let them drink. I tried to explain the situation, how they were empty, and I rinsed them out and put water in them, and he didn't believe me because my sister was so adamant about getting me grounded. It was summertime. I had no phone, no going out, no allowance, but still had to do chores, no pool, for 2 months, mostly my whole summer. I was grounded. To say that I was ticked off is an understatement. So, being older and wiser, I tricked her into a confession. I asked my mom to stand by the kitchen window. I asked my sister, after a bunch of small talk, "Why did you lie to Mom and Dad about me giving you beer when it was water?" Her reply was, "So you'd get in trouble." My mom flew out of that kitchen with the wooden spoon, and my sister got a spanking and grounding. I was repaid my allowance plus some and was allowed a pool party that weekend that I invited all the kids in the neighborhood to, including my sister's friends, and she had to watch from her room all day. Now, as adults, we laugh about it, but man, kids can be straight up mean. Every mom has a go-to weapon of choice for punishment, and my mom's weapon of choice when we were little was anything within arm's reach. After reading these stories, I've been thinking a lot about them. And here's my thought on the story. Story 1, I am going 10 over and you're still tailgating me? Here, let me show you something. I loved the narrator's cheeky revenge on the tailgating BMW driver. His reckless behavior, phoning and riding bumpers, was infuriating. Hitting the speed bump at 45 miles per hour without braking was a bold move. I'd have been too cautious to risk my truck. The image of him slamming his head on the roof had me chuckling. It's a perfect lesson, tailgate at your own peril. I bet he'll think twice before crowding someone again. The narrator's cool-headed execution was spot on, though I'd have been tempted to wave smugly in the rearview mirror. Story 2, cut off and vaguely threaten my wife? Enjoy 5 years of being slightly delayed. The dedication to this petty revenge is legendary. Dick Law's aggressive outburst, cutting off the narrator's wife and cracking her windshield, was outrageous. I admire the narrator's 5-year commitment to slowing him down daily. I'd lack that patience. Adjusting schedules and enlisting colleagues to keep it up shows serious resolve. The internal affairs dismissal was satisfying, but the daily delays were the real win. I'd have loved to see Dick Law's frustrated face. This story proves small, consistent annoyances can hit harder than confrontation. Story 3, you want to slightly insult me? I'll slightly ruin your flight. The daughter's snarky comments about the narrator were uncalled for, especially calling them a silly jerk for needing the window seat. I'd have been annoyed too, but hunching to block the window for the entire flight was a hilarious power move. Skipping snacks and holding their bladder shows commitment. I'd have caved. The narrator's calm pettiness was perfect. I might have added a smug glance. It's a great reminder that subtle revenge can sting just as much as a confrontation, especially on a cramped plane. Story 4, builders dump stuff in front of my office door? Your lunch now paints the walls. The builder's disregard, piling junk and leaving spaghetti in front of the narrator's door, was maddening. I'd have lost it sooner. Kicking the bowl to splatter sauce everywhere was a satisfying, if messy, retaliation. The building management's response, making the builders clean up, was the cherry on top. I admire the narrator's restraint in not escalating further. I'd have been tempted to scatter their tools. It's a lesson in not underestimating someone's breaking point. Those builders learned the hard way to respect shared spaces. Story 5. This girl in the theater had her feet up on the back of my friend's chair. The girl's refusal to remove her feet was blatantly rude. David's patience in asking twice before getting an employee was admirable. I'd have snapped quicker. The narrator's move, sitting behind her and putting their feet up, was brilliant. Holding that position for 2 hours must have been torture, but it was worth it to mirror her rudeness. I'd have tossed in a cheeky comment, but their silent watch the movie was perfect. It's a classic case of giving someone a taste of their own medicine. Story 6. I fed the dog treats. The mother-in-law's constant food theft was infuriating, especially ruining the narrator's cheesecake. I felt their rage after a tough day, only to find fork marks in their dessert. Buying dog treats disguised as animal crackers was a stroke of petty genius. I laughed, imagining her eating them with frosting. I'd have blurted out the truth just to see her face, but the narrator's shrug was cooler. It's a harmless yet satisfying way to teach a boundary crosser a lesson. She deserved that bitter taste. Story 7. Teacher wouldn't let me use the restroom, I got her suspended. The teacher's refusal to honor the narrator's medical accommodations was outrageous and illegal. Her groans and accusations of faking it made my blood boil. I'd have marched to the dean too. The 3-week suspension was deserved. She put the school at risk of a lawsuit. I admire the narrator's assertiveness. Despite their health struggles, I'd have been too intimidated to act so fast. This story highlights why accommodations matter and how some teachers abuse their power. I hope she learned her lesson. Story 8. I got owned by my 7th grade music teacher. I chuckled at the music teacher's clever tactic. The narrator's disruptive behavior was typical teen rebellion, but announcing them as Student of the Month was a masterclass in humiliation. The class applause must have burned. I'd have been mortified at 12. It's a brilliant, non-punitive way to tame a troublemaker. I bet it made them rethink their antics. I'd have secretly admired her wit, even if I sulked then. Teachers like that deserve props for outsmarting cocky kids without cruelty. Story 9. Neighbor won't stay off my property. Gets fenced out. The neighbor's entitlement, micromanaging the crew and trespassing, was maddening. Flipping off the narrator was the last straw. Redirecting the trees to block his access was a smart legal jab. I'd have added a smug wave when he saw the fence. The surveyor confirming the property line was icing on the cake. The generator's noise is a constant reminder of his mistake. I'd install those cameras too. Entitled neighbors don't quit easily. This was a perfect petty boundary enforcement. Story 10. This is an oldie but a goodie. The sisters' lie to get the narrator grounded was peak sibling betrayal. I felt their summer-long frustration. Tricking her into confessing was clever. I'd have been too mad to strategize like that. The mom's swift wooden spoon justice and the pool party punishment were perfect. I love that they laugh about it now, but I'd have milked that party in front of her. Kids can be cruel, but the narrator turned the tables beautifully, proving brains beat brattiness. And that wraps up another episode of our Petty Revenge series. If you guys missed the last episode of Petty Revenge and want to hear more, it's right here, and the stories are absolutely wild. If you aren't subscribed, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future entitled people stories. I'll see you in the next one.